Good morning, Coldwell Banker George Realty. Thank you for attending today's training, which will do some highlights on residential disclosures. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So we're going to start. These are the disclosures, and I have them in two packages. These disclosures are attached to the RPA. Now, some of the disclosures, not the buyer's investigation disclosure, but other disclosures, if you're a listing agent, you may have had the client already sign, the seller. But I like to leave those clean in case you need them. If something went wrong with the deal, you have a clean set. So I always advise that when they send you these disclosures that are attached to the RPA, just have the seller sign them, re-sign them, and keep your clean set in case you needed them if the deal fell away. Okay, so buyer's investigation advisory will be attached. It's going to have the property address, and it's just an advisory for the buyer to take a look at certain things, like they can have square footage looked at, boundary lines. They can hire professionals to take a look at those for them. You see here, it's mentioning termites, things like that. This is just an advisory that attaches and asks the buyer to consider taking a look at these things or reminding them. They do not have to look at everything, but it's just a good reminder for them. Some of the things that we may not be clued into on as a listing agent, rental property restrictions do occur inside of condominium complexes. So if they are buying that condo in an HOA controlled property, then you need to check and look at your HOA documents and see how many rentals that they allow and how many rentals are on the complex, because sometimes they only allow X amount of rentals. So make sure you check that. We have heard in the past where people didn't check on that, and then the people were buying it as a rental. So you make sure you're clued into that, okay? So possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. That's advising everybody that at any time we'll be working with multiple buyers or sellers or dueling. So it is a disclosure. Now, you probably already had your seller sign this when you did the listing agreement. The buyer will send it with the offer. I would recommend keeping your clean one and having the seller sign theirs, and the agents will sign as well. Fair housing and discrimination advisory, super important. I would recommend that you all read it. It's going to go over protected classes and things like that. So this will attach to the offer as well. So I would really recommend that all agents read this. It's good if you're leasing or anything that you're doing, just read this. It has a lot of good information for us. So the buyer will sign, and then the seller can re-sign to keep the other copy clean in case they need it. If there is a buyer's homeowners, I'm sorry, this is the insurance advisory. This will attach to the offer as well. So this is a great advisory. And as we've talked before, that's something everybody should be jumping on day 0. Once that offer is accepted, you need to start jumping on that and making sure the insurance can be obtained, okay?
Especially for the HOA insurance. A lot of carriers are not issuing those.
The internal on the
HOA.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, but a lot
In general?
yeah,
Okay.
in general.
Okay.
It's been more difficult to find now because they
Oh,
are
wow.
hesitating to.
So aside from attaining regular home insurance, home insurance, you have to get HOA insurance?
No, that's in HOA you got 2 types of insurance. One is for the common area and one is for the unit themselves.
Okay. Got it.
But
So
which one are you talking about, Peter?
We have to do both.
But what's harder, the
The individual one is a little harder.
Oh, okay.
Individual units.
Oh. Yeah, so jump on that on day 0. Advise your buyer to be checking immediately. Wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory also populates. One thing about this is please don't get caught up in ever forwarding a wire instruction to your client. If, don't do that. Don't have it on your computer. Don't forward it. Don't be the one doing it. Let escrow handle that notification. It'll probably secure drop to them, or they can go to escrow and pick that up themselves. We cannot forward a wiring instruction to any client, okay? The CCPA, this will also populate with the offer, and everybody needs to sign it, okay? So that's the ones that populate. Now we're going to get into the bigger stack, the ones that we need to do. Hi. Okay. Okay. So let me pull up the residential disclosures that are going to be required. So there's a couple that you're going to get from our website. The CBGR addendum to the purchase agreement, you must have that. I think I neglected for some darn reason not to put it in this package. It is on the list here. You must have that on your deals, and you will pull that off of our website. Okay. So I like this list. We have this in our website. It's sales documentation, and you can pull it on whatever property type you're working. You see the one I pulled here is residential purchase agreements. This tells you what you need. Use these lists. I like to pull them and use them as a check mark. It just makes your life easier if you use these lists that have been created by Anna. So please use the lists. So that will be there to guide you along. So we're going to start with this one is not required, but I really recommend it and I like it. Especially if you're having trouble when you keep transmitting to an agent and they're saying they didn't get it. Receipt for reports. If you're working with an agent that's moving quickly and no problem, you make a receipt for reports here. And it down here, you're going to check everything that you're transmitting to them. Usually I'll just do it in an email subject, disclosures are attached. That's good too. But you can also be more formal and check down here who it's prepared by, or if a certain disclosure, you can check the box that was delivered via link. So this is a good form if you want to keep on track, but any way you transmit them, make sure they know what they're getting from you. You can transmit them in bulk first, but if they don't respond, make sure you're transmitting back via email what you've sent them and when you can expect to receive them back. But this is just an extra form. If you like it, great. If not, do it via email, okay?
When you're transmitting it through email, I think it's better to ask for the acknowledgement of the receipt.
Yes,
Email.
right.
So that you have a record of it that they did receive it,
So when you transmit via email, make sure that you say at the end of your email, please confirm your receipt of the documents, okay? So make sure they're confirming back to you so you have a record.
And I know that I've done that, and I also printed them out and I keep them in my stack with all the other documents. And I put a note saying, I sent a note, this is the confirmation of the paper.
Right, good practice.
So square footage and lot size advisory. This is not, I don't think it's required, but if you want to use it, it's a good form. A lot of times, and it's even telling you right here that there's not a standard measure. There's no official standard measure, and the square footage may vary. The appraisal report could say something different. The assessor's data, if there was any records in the city, those could all be different. The buyer is more than welcome to go measure that or to hire somebody to measure it, but their appraiser will measure it. Now, remember though, appraisal is only used to establish value. They do measure it, but it says right in the RPA that an appraisal is used to establish value. Okay, but this is a form that you can use, public record. If you noticed, if you're a buyer's agent, if there's a public record that's different than what they have on the multiple listing service, you may want to ask the listing agent to provide you this form. Okay, so normally on our MLSs, we are using public record assessor's data. Okay, so buyer homeowners association advisory. I like this. If they are in a situation where they're in an association, make sure you're providing this as a listing agent. It's telling the buyer right here to review all the documents and things of that nature. Okay, so it tells them what to look for, bylaws, rules and regulations, financial information. Reserves is a big and important item on HOA. Do they have the reserves if something goes wrong? Sometimes they'll assess that repair again, to all the occupants or owners, I should say. But you always want to be looking for reserves. Okay, so the buyer just signs. Now, if you are representing the seller, I would send this. I like this form. It's up to you. Their agent should have done it for them, but if you want to send them this form, it doesn't hurt. Okay. BCA, we're all familiar with this. This is required for everybody to sign. Broker compensation advisory. You will have, if you are working with a buyer, you already have your BRBC. That would have been attached, but make sure that it comes in on your disclosures when you are working a deal. We need this disclosure in, okay? So you come down here, the buyer is going to sign as well as the seller. So have them both sign that. Market conditions advisory, we don't require it, but I do like it. The buyer, you are responsible for determining the price you want to offer for a property. We will provide comparables to the seller. They will decide the market price they want to list it at, but the buyer can determine what they want to offer on the property. Usually their buyer's agent will prepare comps for the buyer. Okay. So the listing agent doesn't do that for the buyer if you're not representing the buyer. Usually their agent will. So buyer and seller will both be signing these. Water conserving plumbing fixtures and carbon monoxide detection advisory. This is a civil code, requires that all single family residents, multifamily, commercial property, etc., built on or before January 1, 94, be equipped with water conserving plumbing fixtures in the property. Now, there are some exceptions and they've listed them here. They do not apply if it's a registered historical site, a real property for which a licensed plumber certified that due to the age or configuration of the property or its plumbing, the installation of such devices is not feasible. So you can read these two. This is a required form. This will also have the carbon monoxide detector advisory embedded in here. And it is a requirement as of January 1, 2013. It's California law. We do need to have these installed. And here are some exceptions. But if you're selling any residential, please make sure these are in, okay? So the law does not apply to a dwelling which does not have a fossil fuel burning heater, a fireplace, or an attached garage. But we do require it. So make sure that when you're talking to your seller, those are in the carbon monoxide readers and smokes, okay? So everybody's going to sign this. That's a California law for smokes and carbon monoxide. Lead-based paint. Now this is for housing and rentals, all rentals and leases, but for sales, it's housing that was built prior to 1978. Okay, so this is a pretty simple form unless the seller has some disclosure. They would write that on one if they're aware of any lead-based paint hazard in the property. They're going to write their disclosure here. Now you see here, it says that they've been provided a pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. That is included in the Homeowner's Guide to Earthquake Hazards and Earthquake Safety. That pamphlet's in that booklet, okay? So Both parties would sign here. The agent signs here. And provide that for pre-1978 and all residential leases. So this SPQ, this is a large form. It is not something that we will fill out for the owner, other than you're going to have the address already here, the assessor's parcel number, what city it's in and county. And if it's a duplex or a triplex, make sure you're checking that box. And either this SPQ is for all units. If it's a, let's say 4 units, is it for all of them? Or is it only for 1 unit? Are you doing separate ones? So you do need to pay attention to this if this is for units, okay? So this is something that we are not going to be filling out for the seller. They need to read this. Of course, you can sit with them. I like giving it to them once the listing agreement signed. Don't pressure them. If there's not enough time, go back 2 days later and get them. Please give them the time to digest what they're doing so they can carefully review this. We never want to rush, especially on an SPQ or TDS. Let them digest the disclosures, make an appointment and go back. We don't need to like pressure them, all at once. Because it is a lot of information, so they need to carefully read all the questions, check yes or no. Now, if they...
Let me emphasize that this SPQ is a very important document. And then it has to be filled out by the seller only, and not the agent is not supposed to check it for them, okay? You can assist them, you can explain it to them what the importance of the SPQs are, but you never try to, check the boxes for them. Because we have a lawsuit previously, and the seller was contesting that they never knew what was contained in the SPQ, is because all the questions were answered by the agent, So with that, we have no defense. We have to settle with the plaintiff. So it's very important. No if and buts, and you have to emphasize that to the seller. Very important.
Yeah, that's super important. So again, what I said, based on what Peter's saying, give them time. When you are at a listing appointment, your main obligation or your main priority that day should be get your listing agreement signed. Leave them a package of the disclosures, but point out the SPQ and the TDS. Let them digest that and then come back to them 2 or 3 days later. Let them have time. People don't want to be pressured on such large documents, okay? So if you check, if the seller check yes, you normally they will normally reference like 7A and put it here, okay? And why they checked yes. And they're going to go through this whole form. There's a lot of questions. They're going to read it, answer yes or no, give a little description, or if they need a larger one, they can attach a sheet of paper to explain further, a bigger description, okay? So this is where you would check it. If there's any additional documents, you check here. If you answered yes to any of the above, they want you to refer, like they're telling you here, to the line item 16A, for example. So you would want to, the explanations I usually see up here if there's enough room, but if there's not, make sure that they know they can attach a sheet. Everybody signs it. The seller provides it to the buyer, and then the buyer acknowledges it. Now, this is a form that I like a lot. This will explain to the sellers, and you can leave this with the disclosures. It's a disclosure information advisory. It's telling them how to prepare and complete their disclosures, instructions for completing all disclosures. It's telling them do not leave any questions blank or unanswered. This is a really great disclosure for the seller only when you're the listing agent, to leave with them while they're going to be reviewing those really long documents. Here, it's even going into some information about the TDS and the SPQ. So I love this disclosure. I just was reading it the other day and I thought, wow, this is really nice. So please make sure if you are dropping a package, I would suggest you drop this disclosure on top of your, package so they can read this as well. Okay? If it's a real seasoned seller, it may not be necessary, but don't assume they're seasoned. Let them have the disclosure to help them. This is the TDS, the real estate transfer disclosure property. Up here, you'll see this checkbox if it's for a duplex, triplex, or fourplex. This TDS is for all unit or for individual units. So if they're similar, sometimes they do one TDS, sometimes they need to be doing multiple TDSs because the units aren't the same, okay? Now, these are really important things I've highlighted. This date, when the seller completes this document, that's the date. When they signed it, they completed it, the date goes here as well. Down here, you need to check one of these boxes. Normally, you're going to be checking no substituted disclosures for this transfer, or you have additional reports or disclosure that you will attach to the TDS if the seller so desires or has those reports, or inspection reports completed pursuant to the contract of sale or receipt for deposit. So if you have additional reports, you'll need to check this box. Normally, I don't see that. You don't have a substituted disclosure because they're going to go through their inspections and things like that. But if you do have a disclosure that needs to be given to the buyer, make sure you're annotating that here. If you do not do these three, this one's missed too. Is the seller occupying the property or not? Check yes or no. If any of these are not completed, your TDS is not completed and we will kick it back to you to get that completed, okay? So make sure that this is understood that these need to be filled out. And you can talk to the seller about this section here and ask them about it, okay?
And it's important to note that the TDS carries a 5 days
Rescission.
yeah, rescission period. So in other words, if you don't give the TDS to the parties, then the buyer has the 5 days, within the receipt of the TDS to rescind the contract. In other words, if the TDS was not given to the buyer can always rescind the contract. So you don't have a contract.
Yeah.
Until you give the TDS.
Yes, and if you give this disclosure, and trust me, I've seen it. If you give this disclosure, like Peter's saying, on the 14th day, you just gave them longer period. So, you need to be very mindful of your contingency periods and be as quick as you can on these disclosures without, making the seller stressed out, but be as quick as you can to get those back and deliver them to the other party, okay? Very important, because you don't want to be responsible because you didn't advise the seller of giving, longer contingency periods or cancellation rights.
Right.
Okay, so this is the seller again. We don't put our pin on it. This is for the seller. The subject property has the items checked below. They're going to fill all this out, okay? Answer the questions. Are you, the seller, aware of any defects or malfunctions in the following? They're going to fill this out. They're going to answer all these questions. Let's see. And everybody's going to sign it. The seller, buyer's initials here that they've received it. Back here, I want to go over a little slower. Now, when we do the TDS, we, as agents on the 3rd page, will be signing as well. What we recommend for our brokerage is you're going to check, see attached agent visual disclosure. That's it. You're going to put that there. You're going to sign and date it. Right here, broker representing seller means Coldwell Banker George Realty, not your individual name. You will be signing down here. This is our brokerage name. If you do not get your AVID attached behind the TDS, the TDS, if you check this box, is not complete. So don't make the mistake not to send that. AVID must now be part of the document. It needs to go together. So don't not send it together. So get out fast on your AVIDs as well, okay? And then the other side will do what they do, however their broker is advising them.
What's the recommendation for doing the ABID on a property?
Oh, I would do it once you have the listing and you're,
Once you sign the listing?
yeah. Oh, and the other thing is, don't do it when the investigator's there. We've had trainers here on AVIDs. That's not good. Don't do it when you're with a property investigator. Be on your own doing it, because you don't want to look influenced with what you're writing by an investigator. So you need to be on your own. Do not go and do it over there together. You know, do it by yourself. That is the advice of a trainer on AVID that's very good. Okay. So, and then everybody will sign, the agents here and here. Okay, here is the AVID. So you'll fill this out. Is it a duplex or whatever? Now, if it's this AVID form is for all units or individual, we usually ask you to do individual. That's again, because units aren't always similar. You know, they're not always exact. So you may have, and plus they've been lived in differently. So there may be different things to document. Okay. So the AVID is an important document, but what is it used for? Our trainers have told us over the years, this is used to document material items of the property that would maybe inform a buyer that there's something material there that may affect the desirability or the pricing. So if there's a chip in the wood at the bottom of a wall, oh, come on, that's not going to affect the pricing, right? So we need to think of these items. I had an agent say, I don't know what to note. This thing is nice. You know, it was a new unit. So I said, what they said when we were training is you're going to go around and you're going to look on the outside. Are there any cracks? Are there any marks in the stucco or a crack in the stucco? Is there anything visually around the property that may make people think? And she said, there is. I said, what is it? It's a pond. Okay, people with children may not want a pond right over their fence. So I would note that just in the other section. It's things that may affect materially, pricing, or the desirability of the property. If it's the backyard is up against a golf course, even though you can all see with your eyes, note that in other errant balls may fly over. So you want to note just things like that as well. If it's facing a freeway, I think we'll try to get the gentleman that does the AVI training back. It's very good training, things like that. So where would you note those types of things?
One of the things about the AVID is that you do it objectively, not subjectively. So when you see something staying on the wall, you just stain, notice stain on the wall. Don't say that, oh, it's ugly,
Water.
Yeah.
water damage or
Don't get too
something
damn,
like
don't get
that.
too
You know,
detailed.
don't infer, except it's a water damage or anything, or whether it's ugly or beautiful or things like that. So try to be very objective, not what you think.
There was a lineup over the threshold of a door, and we talked about it. We said visible line.
Yeah.
Over entrance.
Visible line on the.
Yeah, and if it's near train tracks, if it's near schools, why? School impacts parking, it impacts the traffic patterns certain times of the day.
Noise.
Yeah, noise levels, but make sure that on the other section, those types of things you're noting, don't go through what he used to say, and we'll get him back. Don't go through an inventory list. Don't go, oh, living room has a blinds and has a ceiling fan. No, we're not doing an inventory list. We're looking for certain things that may be of interest to the other party. Okay, so if you are in an AVID situation and you have questions, please ask. And you're going to fill out when you do the inspection here. This is the person who is performing the inspection. If your partners and only one partner performed that person's name would go in there. Okay. Request for repair is a biggie. So the CAR forms, the RPA is an as-is contract. Of course, that doesn't relieve the seller from disclosing a material facts on the property, but it is an as-is. However, most agents are going to have an inspection. That is the proper way to advise your clients. And there may be items they don't want to live with, and they're going to ask for repairs. So if you look at number one, the buyer requested the seller prior to close, repair or take action. If you check this box and then you're going to list it here, what action they want taken, what they want repaired. And I know I always say, I think it's better if there's a loan not to have termite reports or Section 1 clearances on the RPA, because then the lender's going to be involved with that report as well. You're going to have to provide it. So I like checking these. So you're also going to advise your client to have a termite inspection. So if there's a termite damage for Section 1, you can check this box and you're going to say, what was the report date that you, the inspector gave you, the date of that report, who was it prepared by? So you're requesting the seller to pay that Section 1 work to be completed. Section 2 is also annotated this way, and that the seller is requested to pay. Section 1 is active damage or infestation. Section 2 is, I believe, things that can lead to infestation. So normally, sellers aren't asked to pay for Section 2, but at any rate, they've provided you a box to ask for that. Buyer requests the seller, or C, the buyer requesting the seller to give them a credit. Sometimes making repairs for other people, they don't like the way you did it. So a lot of sellers just want to provide a credit. Of course, that would be documented in escrow as a credit towards closing costs. Not towards repair if there's a lender, it's going to be towards closing costs, but it's going to be documented here. Okay, and you're going to attach your reports. It's not fair to ask for things. You need to provide the reports to show. Why are you asking? Just attach the whole report here. There is a section for FHA or VA purchasers. So their lender could require some actions to be taken on the property. The buyer's FHA lender requires the following items to be repaired, and they're going to list it here. Okay, and buyer requests that the seller pay for the following costs or expenses required by the FHA lender. They're going to list it here. If the seller agrees to the buyer's request or some of them, the buyer would remove certain contingencies except the following, or check this box. The buyer removes those contingencies identified in the attached CR, contingency removal form. Okay, so, and there's an expiration date on this. Now we're going to come to, the buyer would sign that. Now here's the seller's response. They put this all on one form. It used to be, you know, a lot more complex than this. So the seller agreement, the seller either agrees to all of the buyer's request or they agree to partial. Seller agrees to all of buyer's request if partial, then you're going to list here. Except, what don't the seller agree with? What do they not want to do? So you're going to list that. Or the seller agrees to credit the buyer. If the buyer asked for $5,000 on the onset, but the seller's like, no, I'm only going to credit $2,000, you know, you're going to note that. They don't agree. They want to credit only $2,000, okay? So seller agrees to modify the purchase price or check this box here, if that's the case, or other I usually don't see checked, but these are what you would fill out. A, they agree to all of them, or any one of these 4 scenarios. Don't miss this box. C, when you are responding, listing agents, C should always be checked. If they did not provide you a contingency removal when they submitted this, you're going to check C, always check C. Or if their contingency removal wasn't to the extent that the seller requests, then you're going to attach another one. Seller's agreement only applies if the buyer removes those contingencies identified in the attached form. You are going to create that CR and attach it back. So it will be subject to the signing of that contingency removal. I've seen this miss, don't miss it, because you're giving this, so you want this, right? You don't want to keep hassling to get those contingencies removed, okay? And there's an expiration date here, or the seller can respond in a RRRR, or they can not agree. So people are saying when there's a request for repair, in theory, the seller doesn't have to answer. They do not. However, usually as a professional courtesy, you're going to answer. Even if they don't agree, they don't agree. Over, seller signs it. Seller does not agree to any of the buyer's request. You can document that back to them as a professional courtesy if the seller is in agreement with you doing that, okay? And then down here, the buyer response to the seller partial or conditional agreement. Do not sign until the seller response appears, giving you step by step. So if you take time and look at this form, it's laid out very nicely for you. So here's the seller response to request repair number 1. Usually you can answer it all on the first one, but if you need to provide this form for any reason, you can go ahead and do this. If you think it's cleaner or that's what you prefer, go ahead and do this. You would check A, B, C, or D, or all that apply, okay? Again, you're going to take and make sure you have a contingency removal also attached to this. If you're giving something, you need to get something back on those contingency removals, because as Jimmy and I know, chasing that is a big job, and it's a full-time job all week, every day. So yes. So acknowledgement of receipt, consumer information booklets. Okay, so this is required. We need to provide this booklet. You can download it. You just send it over to the other agent with the form and have the buyer sign it, have the seller sign it that they have provided that. The listing agent and the selling agent will sign it. You just send them a electronic link to the booklet. Okay, so this residential earthquake risk disclosure statement, if the property was built prior to 1960, this form becomes required. So if they don't know, honestly, if they don't know on this form is perfectly okay. Some of these questions, like if there's cripple walls, things like that, they may not know. So don't know is fine. This is prior to properties built prior to 1960.
Michelle, what is a cripple wall? Is that the lath plaster?
No, it's the cripple wall is in the basement and it comes up halfway. I think it stabilizes from what I remember last time I asked somebody, but it's in the basement and it's a halfy wall that kind of stabilizes. But we can get a contractor to answer that, but that's just what I remember. So, you know, some sellers don't know that, and I'm not going to advise them, like I just mentioned to you, what I think it is. I'm going to say, gee, I'm not sure. We can ask a contractor if you really need that answer. Okay. Non-occupied owner properties. Even if it's abundantly, you know, clear to people about 1031 exchange advisories, we don't know their level of sophistication on that. So please be providing them this exchange advisory, and that goes to the seller only, that we have advised them to seek counsel from a CPA, things like that. So please make sure that you give this if they're not occupying residential that you're selling, okay? Now, when we have a home inspection, of course, we get the home inspection report back, right, for our files, but also we would like you, whether it's your buyer or another's agent buyer, to provide them with the buyer disclosure and acceptance of the home inspection. So send this out to them. Now, what happens if it's a different brokerage that says, hey, we're not going to sign this? Put that email into SkySlope, but we do need to get this out regardless if they want to sign it or not, please send it. Our goal is to have it signed. Why? It proves that they got a copy of their own inspection report and that they've reviewed it and approve it. So it's an important document. It is on our website. Please make sure you are pulling this for your buyer or another agent's buyer and having it signed. Address goes here, okay? Buyer contingency removal. This is the CR. This is what you want to stay on top of, especially with a listing. As a listing agent, you're going to keep track of the contingencies. If you're coming up on contingencies, you can either call them and remind them or give them prior to removal date a 2-day notice to perform, which is extremely aggressive. So normally you want to try to advise them. A lot of times they're going to remove a lot of these, but probably in this day and time, they're going to leave that insurance contingency open because they're not going to, you know, that is what could cause some problem right now. So you may see this and they're going to leave this you know, they're not going to remove it. They are not going to check to remove that. What the ultimate goal is, once we get down through everything, or they can check this, that the buyer removes everything except right here, they can make an exception. What our ultimate goal is we want to see this, number 4. So you could do that in steps. You get that once they remove all contingencies, but our file will require that. So they can remove some and remove another, but ultimately we're going to need one where they're removing everything. If the buyers are not removing within the time periods, don't keep it a secret from the seller. Let them know these contingencies were due on this date. Here's what I found out, why they're not removing them. I need to notify you. Let it be their decision, but don't keep them in the dark because we, you know, we're their agent. We owe the fiduciary trust and all that. So don't keep your property owner in the dark about the contingencies. Let them know if they're not removing them. Call the other agent, find out why. See if the seller wants to 2-day notice them to perform, okay? Buyer's inspection waiver, extremely important document. Who would do this? Maybe somebody that's going to buy a property, rehab and resell. But if they are going to waive anything like a home inspection, super important, have them initial here, even for the termite. If they want to waive and not get that, hey, you advise them to get it. If they're not going to do what you advised, then have them initial that they're waiving it. Okay, so this is a really important form for us if the buyer elects not to do the inspections. Okay, so we have to have this. If we don't see an inspection report back for you, you're going to be required to provide us with the waiver. Okay. Notice of buyer to perform here. So what do you want them to do? What action do you want them to take? You want all contingencies removed? What are you asking them to do? They have a section for the contingencies. You can check those. Or what contractual action do you want them to take? Maybe the initial deposit wasn't in on time. You can notice to perform them on that. Okay, that's another thing. The initial deposit, the escrow officer should be telling you when it arrives. But if you don't hear within the time frame, pick up the phone and call. That's also your duty representing the seller to make sure that deposit gets in. Escrow does take care of that, but you need to make sure you know that it's in, okay? Here's the FHA VA clause that is required to be part of those contracts should it be that type of loan. You're going to put the price in here, usually the purchase price, and the buyer and seller are going to sign this, okay? Because there's certain different rules for FHA and VA. So you need to have this. This is required to be part of your contract. Lately, I haven't seen a lot of these FHA VA loans. So, but just so you're aware of that, this is this for your protection, get a home inspection is required to be provided for all FHA transactions. The buyer is the only one signing that. We are at the end, the verification of property condition. This is not a contingency. What it is you go back to the property with the buyer. The buyer takes a look around. Is all the debris removed? Is the refrigerator left? Is the washer and dryer there? Whatever was supposed to be left, make sure it's there. Make sure that the debris is removed and things like that. Sellers, selling agents, listing.
Michelle, I have a question.
Mhm.
That one, the inspection you just talked about, how many days do we do it before close of escrow?
Okay, this one, they say in the contract 5 days before closed, but if you negotiated that the seller's making repairs, please gather all the receipts, invoices, or whatever they have as evidence and go a few days ahead. Now, you're not going to be crawling around the property in the attic, but just kind of verify that the repairs were made. So if you have things like that to look at, go out a little bit ahead. If it's, just a standard verification, 5 days is sufficient.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so if there's no other questions, we're going to conclude the meeting. And remember, if you have anything that you have questions on, be it your offers or things like that, or disclosures when you're in a deal, please come and see us. We're more than happy to discuss it individually with you and help you out and advise you. So with that, I wish you all a beautiful weekend, and I thank you for attending Coldwell Banker George Realty trainings. Thank you all.
Michelle.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.